Will I draw settings? No, but I will draw characters to put in those settings. Pinterest is going to be my best friend for this video, as always, but how am I going to choose what picture to use first with so many options? After scrolling for a while, I decided not to use Pinterest and instead went for a setting from the Maze Runner movie. I'm currently on the 3rd book, so the obsession is real. Obviously, there are already loads of characters since it's a book and a movie, but I wanted to create my own, and also in the book, there is only one main character who's a girl for the most part, and that's Teresa, and if you know who she is not the best character. But I also didn't want to just copy the costumes of the characters in the movie because that would be kind of a cop-out. I wanted to make it my own, and I kind of just focused on the setting, kind of forgot about the story, looked at how the setting looked and placed a character into that, and this is her. You may have noticed that I didn't sketch this out digitally. I actually already had a traditional sketch done, which I did in my sketchbook earlier. I just do not like drawing on my iPad. I always make it way too perfect, but not in a good way. I always end up trying to make it way too symmetrical, but it never looks good, and I always lose the fluidity of the sketch and it ends up looking really stiff. But yeah, once I've done the line art, I moved on to colouring, and I always go for the skin first. I think it's just the largest part that I need to colour. I made it really bright and saturated to show that she's been in the sun quite a lot, so I also added a lot of pink to her skin because yeah, she doesn't just sit at home, she is going out into this deserty place and she's getting a bit of a tan. But I didn't stop there with the skin. I added some dust and dirt all over her, and I also added that to the clothes later on to show that she's been out and about and she's been in some sandstorms. Generally, I just like to add details to the skin because otherwise it's just too smooth for me, so that could be, you know, dust or dirt like this, maybe some freckles, a scar, anything like that to add detail and stop it from looking too airbrushed is perfect. The outfit design for this was really simple. She's just got a top and some shorts on. It's really not that big of a deal. As you can see on the thumbnail, there's a character later on who's got a lot more detail in her outfit, but you know, that's going to differ from character to character, so it's not a bad thing to have a simple drawing. Plus, I did add some little details like a glove. I added some bandages as well, which I splattered a teensy bit of blood on later, but don't worry guys, it's literally nothing like too big of a deal, you know. She's also got a belt. It's got all these little pockets in. I don't know what she's putting in there, but you never know when you're adventuring like she probably does. And yeah, they are shorts, not cargo trousers. I was just a bit too lazy to do the full body, as per usual. I apologise for all of the ums and ahs. I just haven't filmed a voiceover in the longest time. I can't even remember the last time I made a video. Can we just take a second to appreciate the hair? I think I'm pretty good at hair digitally in comparison to what, maybe clothes. I just love colouring it, and I made sure to add some highlights, natural ones. She's not getting any dye in this kind of world, but if she's outside pretty much all day, then she is going to have some natural highlights in her hair. So I added those little golden shines, and yeah, I think it made quite a big difference. Once everything was coloured, I went in another layer and I added all that dirt and sand and dust, and honestly, it was quite hard to do. It's pretty difficult to get a balance of it looking natural but still noticeable. So that took me a while, but it was definitely worth it. Now onto our second character design. I hopped back onto Pinterest for this one, and I made my decision quite quickly, and I chose this picture. I'm honestly not really sure how to describe this one. I mean, it's definitely fantasy. It's a bit swampy, got a bit of a jungle going on maybe. We've got these massive statues and then the fire lighted in the middle. So I was just imagining a character who would be on an adventure walking down that bridge and going into whatever ancient mystery place that's supposed to be. Yeah, it was easy to choose this picture, but what wasn't easy was the sketch. And again, you didn't really see that. This is just the line art, but when I did the sketch traditionally, there was a lot of rubbing out, let me just tell you. I always struggle so much with these fantasy characters. If you watch the last settings into characters video, you probably noticed that my worst one was similar to this kind of theme. I'll put a picture up of it now, but as you can see, I never really know what direction to go in with the costumes because I feel like they have to have a lot of detail for them to look good, but I just wasn't sure what details to add. It took me a very long time to come up with this. I did have to look at some inspiration on Pinterest, but in the end I figured it out, and this is what I came up with. Honestly, I still wasn't happy with it at this stage of doing the line art, and it almost got worse and worse as I coloured, but I think it all gets brought together at the end, and it might even be my favourite piece of the three, hence why it's on the thumbnail. A mistake I made while doing this was that I forgot to draw her cape in the line art, and I had to add that in a lot later on because I just didn't notice it was gone. The colouring was going to be a bit scary because I never really know where to put my colours. I probably should have made a smaller little thumbnail drawing where I just block out the colours, but instead I started colouring it straight away. I went with some browns and some greens, but that was pretty much it. I wanted to keep the colour scheme very concise. Is that the word? I don't know. I wanted to keep it very limited down to earthy tones so it would match the image. I don't think an adventurer would want to be sticking out like a sore thumb, especially if there are dragons or any sort of fantasy creatures that might be out to eat her. Even after a lot of planning and sketching out in my sketchbook, I still wasn't super happy with the design, so one thing that I did change while I was drawing it on my iPad was the staff that she's holding. I made it a lot less straight, a bit more natural, kind of like she just found this laying around somewhere in the wild. Having a limited colour palette was quite difficult, more difficult than I expected. So my plan originally was just to keep brown for like the skin and the hair and then green for the clothes, but I did have to mix it up a little bit and I made the belt brown and the boots brown, but the rest of the dress and the cape was green. That was difficult because it's just one colour. I could make different shades of it and everything, but even so, it's quite hard to make everything look separate but still together. You know what I mean? Maybe you don't. Basically, I just didn't want her to look like a giant leaf. I wanted you to be able to see the different parts of the dress and for everything to go together but still have its own separate little parts. Now that I had all the base colours down, it was time for shading, and for once, I was actually struggling with shading the skin. I don't know why. I think I made it too desaturated originally, so I tried adding some bright green makeup to make her stand out. Maybe make her look like a bit of a princess going on an adventure, but she was just looking absolutely terrifying. And I didn't see that problem until I took a step back and just looked at the thing as a whole. And then at that moment, I was like, right, that's gotta go. And the skin needs to be less realistically shaded. I definitely fixed that in the end by brightening up the skin a little bit, but I think it could have been a lot of a quicker process if I just took a break, because I was getting so hyper-focused on the face, I wasn't looking at the whole thing, you know, as a whole. Even though it failed before, I still like the idea of giving her makeup, so I did the same thing, used the same sort of green, but I made it a lot less big around the eyes. I just kind of did eyeliner with it, and I think it looks pretty cool. You can barely tell it's there, honestly. It's just a subtle little hint, maybe a little nod to the fact that she's not some peasant roaming the woods. She's here on a mission. She's a pretty important person or elf or whatever she's supposed to be. After all that struggle, I had to move on to shading the clothes, and this was probably the most boring part of the process because it's all green and there were so many layers because I separated all the different parts of the clothing onto different layers. It was complicated and it was just very long-winded. In the end, it pays off, but was I having fun? Not the most fun at this part. With all the effort it took for me to get to this stage, I was actually very pleased, especially when I added in the background and it came together. I love it. Okay, now for the third drawing. I chose this image to base my character off of, and as you can see, it's very sci-fi considering this thing is roaming the streets, and it's very industrial with a whole factory in the background. There's a lot of smoke or pollution just flying around the place, and it's pretty messy, so this character is not going to be the princess type that we saw in the last one. Once I'd sketched out the pose and the face and all that in my sketchbook, I immediately knew two things. The first thing was she was going to have a cloak of some sort, because this place doesn't look like the safest place to be. Maybe that's just me, but I think she's gonna need something to hide her identity or something to stay, you know, out of the spotlight when she's walking around in the dark. Second of all, I knew that I wanted her to be wearing something inspired by this. The shapes are just very sci-fi. I don't know why, it's just giving me those vibes. I've seen it before and I knew that's what I wanted to do. Annoyingly, I chose this side-on pose for her instead of a front view, which is good in a way because I always do front views. I mean, you've already seen 2 front views today. However, you can't really see the design, and that's something that I didn't think about. At least I made her head face the front, so you can see that cheeky little eye on the left, which I'll explain later, maybe. But yeah, you can't really see the design of what she's wearing too much, which is okay because, you know, it's hinted. You can tell what I'm trying to aim for. However, I would have liked to get some more detail in there. Originally, the sleeves of this cloak were down, but I felt like I was running from my responsibilities a little bit there, so I rolled them up, and that also added some new shape language, which we love. The cloak was also looking a little bit boring in general. I mean, what's so special about a dark cloak on a character? Literally nothing. So I added this cog design on the sleeve, and also on the back. You can't see it fully. Again, the side-on view kind of ruined that, but you can tell what it is. And I quite like how it looks. I made it a slightly lighter version of the base color, and I think it works pretty well. It's still something that would keep her hidden, but it's not boring. This girl is some sort of cyborg. As you can tell in the picture, there was this character. They're definitely not fully human, either that or they're wearing a mask. So I wanted to make her human, but with some robot attributes. She's got this eye, which is glowing blue because, you know, it's electrical or whatever. She's also got these lines going through her face, which are something that looks cool, basically. I went for a dark blue hair because if this is sci-fi, I'm pretty sure that's going to be possible. And there's also a lot of purple in her skin. I just feel like purple and blue are very futuristic colors. I don't know, I feel like in a lot of sciencey movies, you see purple and blue quite a lot. So that definitely contrasts with the gray and the brown. Sorry about this section of the video being so much shorter, but I accidentally imported the video time-lapse as a short version. So yeah, sorry about that, but hopefully you enjoyed.